Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Going Cosmic with OnBase 14 webinar. We've been waiting for OnBase 14 to come out for a while, so everyone is very excited to get started and show you what it's got. So we've added a new person here in our support group. His name is Gabriel. You'll be hearing him on the phones in the next few weeks, and he's now already taking support email. The latest that we took yesterday of our support team. Andy and Gabriel are going to be doing most of the supporting today. I am just here to get it started.
We didn't even have to bring free food, and she's here. She's so nice.
So just like, you know, and all of our other webinars, the audience is muted. There is a chat window, so if you have any questions, you can go ahead and put them in there, and we'll look at them at the end. You can always contact us at support@navient-inc. during or after. If you have any questions that you'd like us to answer, we'll get back to you with those. There is a survey to complete at the end of the webinar. That's really important to us because we use those surveys to create our next webinars. So please make sure to fill that out at the end. And as you can see there, there's the link to all of our webinars. So we'll get started. So Andy, I will turn it over to you.
Alrighty. Good morning, everybody. So we've got a new build of OnBase. In this webinar, we're just going to go over the release overview and touch on some of the new fixes that are in the new release. There's some big changes to workflow and WorkView, as well as some new modules like the reporting dashboard, the external access client, and some of our favorite old modules like Unity Forms have some new interesting functionality in this release. So without further ado, why don't we get started? So, the release overview. We've got the big 1.4 OnBase 14. So what does that mean, really? What's the first thing you'll notice about OnBase 14? Probably the branding. The whole release has gone through some new logos, some new branding. This is more in keeping with Hyland initiative with their capture, process, access, integrate, measure, store spiel. We'll touch on what all of those things mean and what parts. Actually, we touched on those with the OnBase 13 release, where each module falls into the 6 steps of ECM at Hyland. We're actually probably not going to touch on that a whole lot in this presentation. We're just going to go straight for the features themselves. So, what are the features and changes in this release? Well, there are over 4,000 enhancements in OnBase 14, 9,500 total changes, and 110,000 man-days worth of effort in this build. It is pretty massive. There's a lot of new stuff in here. For example, there are some major changes to workflow, and we're going to touch on those first. But WorkView also got a big overhaul in this release. And if you're not using WorkView, you might be interested in it. Unity Forms got some enhancements, as we mentioned before. We'll go into those in a bit. The Unity Client got some enhancements and bug fixes, quite a lot of bug fixes in Unity Client. And then there are some actual new features that are really useful and I think will be really helpful for folks. So why don't we jump right in, and we'll start with workflow. So what's new in workflow? Probably the biggest thing is that workflow configuration has moved to OnBase Studio. I'm going to let that sink in for a second. Workflow configuration has moved to OnBase Studio. You cannot configure workflow in the OnBase Classic Config module anymore. If you try, you get this error message saying, hey, go install Studio. So wait, doesn't that mean I need an application server? No. Studio can also now use a direct ODBC connection, so you don't need to set up an application server if you don't have one. You can always set one up if you want. They're nice. You should try it. But you don't need one, which is really nice. So what does that buy us? We're configuring workflow in Studio. What does that get us? Well, the first major improvement to workflow is workflow events, and this is massive. Basically, this is the beginning of an event-driven architecture for workflow. It's a new trigger. You configure it like a system task, and these events you configure it like a system task, right? So you build some workflow logic, and then that workflow logic can then consume an event generated elsewhere. It can be generated by a life cycle, any life cycle. Because they're built like system tasks, they're not bound to a life cycle or a queue. They can consume other life cycles from other queues, like when a document enters or leaves a queue. They can also, very interestingly, consume events generated by Unity forms. The only event right now, this is a new interface, they've only added one for Unity forms, and that is Unity form submit. You can have a Unity form generate a submit event and then have some workflow event logic consume that event and do some processing on that form no matter where it exists, in or out of workflow, which is really super useful, extremely powerful. Think about that for a second. Any Unity form, generate a form, fill it in, hit submit, some workflow executes on it immediately without it having to touch a queue. That's pretty big. So with added complexity in workflow, they've also added something really nice that I think a lot of people have been asking for, and that is what they call it the item generator. It's an automated testing platform for workflow. You can generate large numbers of test documents with it, and you can insert those documents with keywords, particular keywords that you filled out into any part of any lifecycle or queue. And you can then, when you're done testing, you can then clean them all up with a single click, which is really handy if you're building something in test and then you don't want to move all that data to prod. You can just get rid of it after you're done testing. Item generator is a big deal. It's a great, great new module. So what else do we get? Copy lifecycle. This one I know people have been asking for. It really is that, it seems really simple on the surface. But there are a couple of extra features. You can just duplicate a lifecycle, or you can copy a lifecycle as a reference copy, which will disable it. No documents will flow through it. It'll be basically there for reference, for documentation purposes or for testing. Like, let's say you have a very complicated workflow and you're like, well, this works, except I want to make it one extra thing here at step 127. Let's make a copy of it as a reference copy, and then we'll make our change in the working copy. And if it doesn't work, we can just go back to the reference copy. So along with copy lifecycle, we get a comparison tool now in Workflow Studio, which is really handy. When you're copying lifecycles around, you can now compare, well, so let's say user A makes a change to your working lifecycle, and you go back and 3 weeks later something isn't working, and user A is on vacation, you have no idea what changed. You just use the comparison tool to figure out what's different between it and the reference copy of the lifecycle that worked. Piece of cake. The other thing it can do is it can compare between two different databases. So you can compare test and prod, or dev and QA. You can compare two life cycles on two completely different OnBase installs. Yep, test and prod, reference and working life cycles. The difference in a two-pane view with color coding to show you what's new in the left side, the reference copy, what's new in the right side, the comparison copy. Really handy tool. Really, really handy. So with that, we're going to move on to WorkView. WorkView's had some major, major improvements in 14. Number one is the WorkView schema has been moved into the main OnBase database. For those of you who don't use WorkView, this sounds like, well, why hasn't it been? Why didn't they do this originally? The WorkView schema and WorkView tables have existed separately since WorkView was created. And it's been kind of a pain to juggle a WorkView workflow or WorkView OnBase installation because you've got two databases to back up. You've got databases that can go out of sync because you can make a change with workflow config or with WorkView config, and it may or may not take effect immediately. They have several resets, and it generally misbehaves a lot. In this case now, with the schema being moved into the main OnBase database, you get a lot more consistency. There is a catch with this, in that if you're already running WorkView, you can't quite parallel upgrade with 14, sort of. I'll go into details here. If your OnBase installation uses WorkView, ever used WorkView, or was ever licensed for WorkView, it has those tables. It has a WorkView table with WorkView schema that's separate from your OnBase tables. In that case, you'll need to run a new tool called the WorkView Migrator, and we can help you work through that. It's a little complicated, but it works very well. It's very quick. And the WorkView Migrator will move the WorkView tables back into the OnBase database. Then you're free to upgrade the database with config like you normally do on an upgrade. Piece of cake. Then you have to make sure, once it's upgraded, upgrade all of your clients that touch WorkView to 14. Because if they try and use WorkView on a 14 WorkView on a 13 client, they're going to be looking for tables that don't exist anymore. Just won't work. From that point on, once you've run the migrator, upgraded your database, upgraded your WorkView clients, you can then do the normal in-place parallel upgrade scheme that we're all familiar with. Anybody else can do whatever they want. They're not touching WorkView. You can still upgrade them later in parallel, in series, whatever you'd like to do. All right, so that's out of the way. That's the messy work. So what does that get us? WorkView is now configured in Studio. It's not, this is not a WorkView config is going away. In this case, you can configure it in either place. But configuring it in Studio gets you a couple of advantages. You now have a design view for your WorkView applications and objects, which is really handy. You can figure out how things are supposed to flow through WorkView, which, as some of us know, can be a little obtuse at times. The design view is manual, just like design view in Workflow, FYI. But it can be really useful for documenting things. Studio adds a find and find dependency tool, which are very cool. I meant to get some screenshots of this because it's really neat. They only have screenshots in the demos right now, and I don't have any WorkView configured on my VMs. Basically, it works like find in Workflow. The Workflow find, where you can sort, in this case, in WorkView, like of employee name will return the filters that reference that attribute. It's really handy. Really helps to unobfuscate WorkView. And when you're configuring filters, by the way, you get a live filter preview in Studio now, which is awesome. You can finally see what your filter is going to look like without having to save your WorkView config, close your Unity client, reopen it, go back into the filter where you were, and then do a search and see how it looks. And oh no, I want this column to be in a different location. Close your Unity client, go back into config, change the filter. No, now it's a live preview. You move a column around, it updates instantly. It's fantastic. Great. So along with gaining these new features in Studio, it also gets access to the new import, well, new to WorkView, the same WorkView or Workflow import-export tool we had in Studio before, which is really nice. Excuse me. Now you can import and export WorkView alongside your Workflow. This is active. You can import and export all of your related OnBase things alongside your WorkView things. You're exporting a WorkView application, it'll pull in on the relevant document types, any workflow that's associated with it, keywords that are associated with it, along with the objects, attributes, filters, all the other WorkView things that it normally would have exported from WorkView config. There's a caveat with it, which I'll get into. Yeah, it's incompatible with the old WorkView import-export. The two files are different formats, they just don't work together. So you can still use standalone WorkView config to import your old files, switch over to Studio, you can import and export from Studio. The nice thing about it is you can use this new tool to generate comparison reports. Just like with Workflow Compare, you can take a look at WorkView objects, classes, and applications and see what has changed between your import file and what's live in the database. Report, kind of an HTML report style. Still very powerful. This is pretty major. Anybody who's configured external autofill keyword sets to talk to WorkView attributes, filters can be external autofill keyword sets. That's big. It means no more SQL. No more SQL to do that. You configure a filter in Studio, you assign it keyword types in Studio, then you build the autofill keyword set in config. There's a new radio button for WorkView filter, assign it to the filter, you're done. No more SQL. It's a really nice feature. All right, so running. Next up is Unity Forms. Unity Forms got some great improvements in this build. There's now an autofill keyword. That doesn't sound real major, but basically that's automatic reverse autofill keyword sets. You just add the button to your Unity form and tell it up on. So for example, if you have like customer data with a customer ID, first name, last name, company name, etc., where your autofill keyword set is set on the customer ID. So in order to autofill it, you need to know, well, Joe's blinds happens to be customer ID 1872124. Well, I'm not going to remember that, but you look up Joe, put Joe into the first name, hit the lookup button, hey, there's Joe's blinds. That's a great idea. Automatic, drop it on the form, works like a charm. Nested tables. Tables within tables. It's a table section. Nested tables, I know, are a feature that people have been asking for. Hyland designed it for AP processing, for adding more data to your line items, which it definitely can do. For everyone, though, it means a huge increase in data density on a Unity form because your line items can contain, your line item tables can contain more tables now. It's not drag and drop. You have to configure it through an interface, but it's pretty easy to do. I meant to get some screenshots on that. Sorry about that. But that's a big feature. Nested tables, very good. Another new feature they've been trumpeting for Unity Forms is calculated labels. It's essentially new styling for calculated fields, where you can have the field display as a label instead of a text box. This is important if you want to have a dynamic document title. Is a great example. You already have an auto name string that updates after you finish indexing. You can have a calculated label as your header way up at the top of your form, and that'll calculate as you're filling the form. It's completely dynamic. Works just like a calculated field. It is a calculated field. Those can be placed, unlike calculated fields, calculated labels can be placed in the header or footer, so they will carry over across pages as well, tabs. Handy. Printing capabilities in Unity Forms have gotten much better. The Unity form will now strip out all the styles from the forms. So if you have a nice form with a dark background and some light boxes for filling things in, you'll no longer use up all of your black toner when you print it. it will go back to black and white and print much more sanely. Tabs in your Unity forms will print on separate pages. They will not span pages anymore. So if you have a tab, for example, you have a long tab that goes across page 1, halfway down page 2, it'll stop there. Page 3 will be the next tab. Same goes for sections. It won't cut sections off midway through. You have a long section that goes down past the bottom of the form. It'll just move that section to the next page. It's very nice. If you find yourself printing Unity forms often. So one last thing I want to talk about here was the comparison tool. I've mentioned the comparison tool in Studio and in WorkView, where you have a live lifecycle compare in Studio. You have a report format compare in WorkView in Studio. The Unity client also gets a compare function for any text-based document types. That can be pure text documents, full documents, text-based PDFs through the PDF input filter, or most importantly, Office files, Word docs, Excel spreadsheets, PowerPoints. It'll highlight, again, like Studio, it'll highlight your source document on the left, target document on the right, show you the differences between the two documents in a color-coded view. That's also a pretty big deal. And that they've actually been rolling out together as a big diff tool function that's across OnBase now, which is really handy. So, without further ado, hopefully I didn't talk too fast for anybody out there. I'm going to hand this over to Gabe, who's going to talk about reporting dashboards.
Thanks, Andy. So reporting dashboards is another new feature that's introduced in OnBase 14. We're going to go over some of the basics about that, and I'll give you a few peeks into what that's going to look like for you as well. So, assuming I can get through here. Yeah, so reporting dashboards are basically a report delivery mechanism that's going to allow your users, especially business users, at a glance access to real-time information from your OnBase database. They are real-time data that users can see that do allow on-the-fly filtering based on date ranges or clicking within there to get drill downs into that data. It's really pretty exciting to actually see it in use, and it will be really useful for users to be able to see that information real time, not having to go in and configure custom reports to get to it. At this point, the reporting dashboard module is only available within the Unity client, and it does reporting dashboard database license as well as the Unity server license to use the functionality. So, if we go in here, we're going to go into a little bit of sort of the configuration or the structure and the terminology that OnBase is using for these reporting dashboards. First up, we have data providers. And data providers are essentially the tools that you're going to configure in order to get data from within your OnBase database. There are four different sort of pre-configured data provider types, which are document query, workflow activity, workflow configuration, and workflow inbox. You want to have in the reports. Document query is going to go and pull data about documents, doc type, keywords, other database metadata associated with those documents. Workflow activity is going to show you sort of the transaction history of your workflows. So if you're looking for that kind of information about which documents entered workflows at different points in time, that's the historical transactions within your workflows. Workflow configuration is just like it sounds. It's giving you information about the configuration of the existing workflows you have in your system. And workflow inbox is showing you the current content, the items that are currently in workflow. So that's sort of more of a snapshot of the current status. So when you create a data provider, you'll go in, you'll select which kind. If you have reporting needs that aren't met by those, you can also use a custom SQL data provider type, where you can write a custom SQL query. You can also use macros, stored procedures, and user-entered parameters in those. So there's some flexibility around that. Yeah, so those are your data provider types. is the dashboard item. And these are your components, so your constituent elements within your dashboard. These are the pieces that show up there. So your different graphs and tables that you can show within the dashboard. Yeah, like I said, they graphically display the information from these data providers. You can associate one or more data providers with a specific dashboard, and those items will be pulling from a specific data provider. We're going to go into what some of the items look like, because I think there's a lot of flexibility there. They're pretty cool. They can show you information in a lot of different ways. So your first one is what we're calling a chart. It's basically a bar graph, as you see here. You can also use a stacked bar. There's some flexibility with what you can do as far as the bar graph goes. That's pretty straightforward. Next, one of the other ones is the chloropleth map, which is really actually pretty cool, where there are some predefined maps within the system. And when you configure this, you map out your data saying what element or what keyword is going to map out to a specific, whether it's going to be based on zip code or a state code that you're storing somewhere in the system. You make sure that that's mapped correctly, and basically this will go through and create this map for you, whether you want this to be your U.S. map. There's some world maps as well. There's some additional flexibility there, and it's really pretty easy to use some point-and-click configuration of maps, of graphs and maps like this that look pretty cool and pretty fancy.
So a chloropleth map would be something that maps something through, changing color via density or value.
Correct. Yep. Next one up there, and I'm not going to go over all the different types. I'm going to just show you a few of them, is your standard pie chart, which is pretty straightforward. Everyone's seen those before, but it's easy to configure. You basically just select the type, pull in the types of data you're trying to map or trying to graph on this, and boom, you have it there. You can also set up a pivot table really easily with the data there, so you don't need to go and export to Excel and then create a pivot table there and distribute it. So you could set up a pivot table ready to go for users to just be able to see, and this obviously would work well in conjunction with map that part of this. Then you show this pivot table as well. This one is looking at some state-by-state data of some sorts in there. Those are the ones I really pulled into here. There are a few other ones that I want to just make note of. There's a gauge data type, which looks sort of like a speedometer type gauge, where you can, it's good for user performance or something like that. So if you're looking at maybe some of your workflow information to see which users are working more cases or more items, and you can also set up sort of parameters in there as far as what the expectations for users' work is. So you can see that and sort of comparing across.
SLAs too.
Absolutely.
Getting to your SLAs.
Yep, so you have that. The other piece I wanted to point out is there's a range filter. I didn't include a screenshot of, but it's something that OnBase is really pushing for these. So you can, like I mentioned before, you can drill down into the data by clicking on your graphs, and that'll filter to that specific piece. So let's say you have a bar graph saying years by year. If you click on a year there, that'll filter the rest of your graphs on your dashboard to that specific year. The other way you can do that is by adding a range filter element, which is essentially a timeline where you can drag and drop the endpoints, and it will go and I guess time is only one possibility, but it's a line where you can drag and drop endpoints to filter the data that's shown in the dashboard. So when you add that filter to that one element or that one dashboard item, the rest of the items of the dashboard also will respect that. So it's really easy. Go in there and just click on the dashboard and get the information that you need. Drill down right into it right from there without any additional configuration.
Cool.
So we'll go into some of the basic configuration for the dashboard and where this is set up. As I mentioned before, it's done within the Unity client. The dashboard, all of the dashboard functionality currently lives in the Unity client. There's a dashboard item on your ribbon. You can go and create a dashboard using the Create New Dashboard wizard. This gives you the option to go and copy from an existing dashboard. Within here, manage the user groups and the security for who has access to see and to edit these dashboards. Data providers are configured similarly in a wizard type workflow, where you're going to be able to go in there and add the appropriate data provider type and which information you're looking for there. Then the dashboard designer is where you take those data providers and you say, okay, I want to add a graph now, and you'll click in there, you'll add that. and you'll just drag and drop information from your data provider into what you want in your X and Y axes, and it automatically shows up there. It's pretty amazing. One point I wanted to point out is that users must have security for all the data providers in use on a dashboard to view the dashboard. So otherwise, those will show up as blank. So security is important here, like it is anywhere within configuration. One last piece on dashboards before we move on is that you also have the ability to go ahead, if you have requisite security, of course, to go ahead and share these dashboards via a number of different mechanisms. You can share them. You can add a dashboard to your personal page within the Unity client if it's something you use a lot. You can go ahead and export the data to Excel. You can go and share that. There's one of the sharing options I'm blanking on. I'll get back to that later. But there's a lot of sharing options, so there's a lot of flexibility there as well. So the next piece I wanted to go over, which is another new module in OnBase 14, is the external access clients. Some of you may be familiar with, or most of you may be familiar with Status View in previous versions, where you could go in and create these portlets for users to see and within the web client. This extends those portlets out through an external web portal for external users who don't have access to the web client, so you don't need to go and set that up everywhere. So you can, this is basically just a web front end, a complete web portal for external users to your system. One nice thing about it is that the users who connect to this are not consuming OnBase licenses. So when they're connected, that's not using up an OnBase license. Interface allows for some easy customization for possibly an off-site administrator of this portal. So you would assign an off-site administrator who would set up all the different pieces for what's going to show up within that portal. I'm not going to go too much in depth about that, but I think it's something that's really important about how this external access client works is you can set up this, have an outside administrator sort of set up how this looks, maybe add some different logos, add some different color schemes. And then you also can assign super users from this outside user group who have the ability to do a little bit of sort of user maintenance and user access control rather than having that all fall to you.
Like password rotation.
I don't remember the specifics, but there's some like user activation, deactivation, and deletion that can be done.
Perfect. Yeah. If you have no idea who else is using it on the other end, that would be a terrific role for them.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So within the web interface, like I was saying, you can add existing or create new status view portlets. You can create those right in your web. Picture what that looks like coming up here in a little bit. There are a whole plethora of different portlet types you can use, custom queries, file upload, HTML, document knowledge transfer, all different kinds of functions. So basically a lot of the same things you can do in the web client, you can now just push out through this web access portal in the external access clients. Yeah, and like I said, here are some of the different things that you can modify color. You can apply a CSS style across this. So if you already have one built out organizational, you can apply it. Simple to do. You upload that, then apply it. You can upload organization-specific logos and banners, especially if you're maybe working with another organization and that doesn't share the same branding that you have. They can go ahead and upload their organization-specific logos there really easily. There's some integration with workflow here, both for sort of user provisioning is one way where users can submit forms within the external access client that will kick off a user provisioning process workflow within your standard OnBase implementation where you can go and have one of your real administrators approve them. There's also other integration with workflow. There's some document upload pieces. You can have Unity forms that are created here and used. So there's a lot of different integration points. It's really similar to what you could do in Status View in the web client previously. We've just moved a lot of that out to the external access clients. And I mentioned the distributed security and administration pieces before. And I'm just going to go in here. So this may look familiar if you've worked with Status View before. You see here's the Status View or configuration within the web client. This is showing a custom query. And if we go through here, then we will see that same custom query showing up within the external access client. The tabs that you see there are completely configurable. Some and different tabs will be available if a user has super user or administrator privileges as well. So a lot of that, so that management that those super users or administrators will do will also be right through the external access client. So you're not giving them admin access within the web client, within anything else in OnBase. It can be all through this HTML, this web portal. I think that's all I had about the external access client.
Looks like. If you guys want to know more, you can come to the summit. Our Navient Summit in October, just a couple of weeks away. All of our demonstrations and labs there will be using OnBase 14, so you can get your hands on it early before your organization gets it. See how you like it, give it a test drive, kick the tires. We are specifically going to be going over some workflow and OnBase Studio classes, and we're going to be touching on the reporting dashboard as well there. And of course, as with every Navient Summit, there are a ton more classes and lectures that will be going on. So for sure, if you haven't signed up for the summit, do so now. Absolutely.
You can do that from our website. So if you go out to our navient-inc.com website, you can register for the summit there.
Excellent. Thanks, Jen. So that's it. That's what we've got. As always, there are our online resources, the blog.navient-inc.com, and of course Hyland Communities, which is onbase.com/community. Does anybody have any questions? Sure, there are questions. Anyone have any questions? Go ahead and type your question in the chat. Anybody? I don't think we have any questions. No. All right. So, current versions, obviously OnBase is up to 14 now. The current build of core is 14.0.0.10. Classic client is 14.0.05.08. Kovacs Capture is still at 10, and VRS Elite is 5.1. R2, and Teleforms is up to version 10.8. As always, you guys can give us a call at Navient Support. The 800 number is 1-800-686-8789, or send us an email, support@navient-inc.com. We've also got the portal page where you can submit a request form. It goes right to our support inbox. Or you can get us online with the live chat. Just go to the portal page there at navient-inc.com, About Us portal, and click the orange button. You can send us an instant message that's very instant, and we'll definitely talk to you immediately. Because it makes a really annoying noise on our computer. So what's the next webinar? November 19th, we're going to be talking about OnBase Studio in a deep dive. We're going to take a very detailed look at it, since it's the new way to configure OnBase workflow. We're going to dive deep into it, and we're going to take a close technical look at it. Join us for that, November 19th. And then, of course, before that, we've got the Navient Conference, October 13th and 14th at the Harley Museum in Milwaukee. So bikes are optional. You guys can come in your cars. It's fine. Come on down, sign up for it, and join us there. We would love it if you were there. We have no questions, no chat? All right. We're going to wind this one up a little early for a change. As always, if you have any questions, give us a call, send us an email, or visit us online at navient-inc.com. Have a great day.